Hello guys. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue from my last video, which was just the general introduction of Jhipster and all that kind of stuff. So what we'll do is we'll generate our first Jhipster application. Before I do that, I need to go to my computer's here, so go cd, and then I'm going to say lul pos. So what we're going to do is the a point of sale. And if I don't have it, I'm going to create mk directory lul. Actually, let me clear so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to say make directory. Let me just make sure that I'm at the home. I am. And I'm going to say make direct. I'm going to do make mkdir, which allows me to create a directory called lul pos. We're going to generate the code for point of sale, and then I'm going to say cd. Make sure you say cd. So if you generate Jhipster outside where the folder that you generated, you don't want to do that in your home directory basically. Otherwise you'll have to do a lot of cleanup, because it generates so many files that you can't tell whether it's your a Jhipster generated or not. So actually, to go back, I think I gone to somewhere else. Sorry about that. As I was talking, I didn't realize that little pause. So yeah, so clear again. So what I'll do is now I'm gonna we don't have anything in here. If we do ls, even lsa, we won't find anything in here. So what we need to do is in here we need to create a Jhipster application. Basically we can do Jhipster and then it will give us question. So here it's saying you want to create a Jhipster application. You remember when I said something about generators, when I was explaining about generators, I said generators, they take input, they transform the input, and then they give you output. The output we want is the code. Actually, if there is a boss, my boss said, give me a Java application that does this, or a React integrated with React Native application that does this, that's connected to a database, MySQL, that has Elasticsearch server somewhere, that supports Docker, that does this, all these things that normally you would want together. This is the input we're going to give. So let's pass the input now. Let's talk to Jhipster and tell it what we want so that it gives us source code of a project. Okay, so what we're telling now, there's three things. It's going to ask us a question about here type. It says, what application type would you like to generate? So I'm going to say I don't want a microservice for now, but even though they're the thing, or eventually you'll have to, if your application gets bigger, all that kind of stuff, then you would have to convert your monolithic application to microservice application. But for now, we're not going to go directly to microservice. We'll just develop a monolithic application, which means is one application where all your code, everything is in there, the gateway, the security, the and even if you want to scale it, you just like, all you have to do is like it can scale it, but like it's not like a microservices which were designed for scaling, which require are developed in modular ways where each small part of your functionality of your application you can just put it as a separate service with its complete layer of stuff like the database, the it is configurations running separately on a different Docker container or something like that. So we don't want all that kind of stuff. We just want a monolithic application which everything is in one application. Our business logic, our gateway logic, our React stuff, and everything is in one place. So let's select monolithic application, and obviously it's asking us the name, but it suggests also, do you want to use the name of the application as lulpos? Yes, I'm gonna say yeah, that's what I want. Actually it's very clever because it's also asking me, it knows, it's picked up my the the package name that I've used to create for the project, the lulpos, lulsolutions.com, and it's remembered somewhere, but I'm gonna accept it, which is exactly this package is all your Java files to be in unique directories. They need to have package name, and that package name is where everything would start from. If you can, I can have sub packages of those things, but this is the identification. But it's just like the same way that you have and in your identity of like your identity tree, like your father, your grandfather, all that kind of stuff, and then the fact that your father may have two children, but you and your brother, but like the fact if your name is mentioned with your father and your grandfather and his grandfather, then it becomes one unique line of identity. So that is just like Java's way of doing these things is called packaging, which is we have to give a name, a package, and then to identify which class we're talking to. So that is the package name we're going to take. Here it's asking me Jhipster registry configuration. We're not going to use microservices. You selected this option if you want to microservices so that your microservices can discover between themselves using this called the Jhipster tool. So I'm not gonna say I'm gonna say we don't want that. We're not gonna use. We're talking about here now authentication type. What authentication do we want? JWT is the simplest one. Java Web Tokens or JSON Web Tokens, one of them, I can't remember exactly. But there is also OAuth2, which we can use, but this is better if we're going to use it if you're using microservices. So for simplicity, what we're going to use is JOT, basically JOT or JWT, to secure our application. Obviously, our application will have a Spring Boot application that is configured with JOT and all that kind of stuff because Jhipster backend is Spring based. Now he's talking about some of the database. Look at this input we're talking about. It's asking us, it's talking us to like, what do you want? You want a MongoDB? You want a Couch database? You want a Cassandra? It's telling us all these stuff. So we're going to say, yes, we want SQL. I always like SQL because of the relationships that I can got used to, like many one-to-many relationship. But even in the SQL family, you have the H2, which is in memory database for development if you want to use it, and also MySQL, MariaDB, which is an extension of MySQL, Postgres, which is a completely different stuff, but it's also SQL based. The Oracle database, MySQL based. I remember the other databases like MongoDB and CouchDB, they called document-based or whatever, some document-based databases where they just like store values, like a key value stuff of with a name, and then rather than the same way MySQL databases store things, which is a filled column. In a table and also database, but they use these things called documents. It's just like storing documents in there, and they have their own difference, completely different from they call non-SQL database. So I'm gonna select MySQL, and I'm gonna say I don't want to MariaDB, but I want or Microsoft SQL Server. I want this one. So if when you're selecting, you just click basically enter, and H2 is so what it's just asking me the first time in here. If you have a look at is the production database, but also it's asking me the development database. I could use HT, which is in memory based database, SQL database, but I want my production to be exactly the same, my development to be exactly the same as production. So I'm gonna use MySQL, even though if there would be no problem if you used H2 as well. So MySQL, I'm going to select that, and now that we have generated the application, actually we have to do something else here, which is the caching. So Spring caching, there is something called Spring caching abstraction, um, which is a way of storing the information. For example, you have a caching. What that caching means is an API has been called, or with a RESTful API, and then there is a data that doesn't frequently change in your database. Like maybe you have a list of products that every 1 month one person changed and all that kind of stuff. You rather than and you have 200 applications connected to that, and then every time you call their API, it goes to MySQL database and then reads basically in real time, and that is a lot of overhead. You don't need, for example, especially when it is possible that another API has called about 10 seconds before this call, and then all it did was just read something from the database and it returned. So there is some intelligence that you can do it, that you can include in your application to say that I want you to cache these things, because of it doesn't make any sense if you have called the database products table 5-10 seconds ago, and then you had results and you pass it to one application. If another application wants the same product ID after 10 seconds, this it's unlikely that the owner of that product is going to change in 10 seconds. So what you need to do is just cache it. If another application wants, database calls are very expensive. Do not go to the database. Just store the information that you return to the other person, the product information, the generic information. Store it somewhere for that SQL query result, and then later when another application comes, give it to him. So there is this thing called caching, which would allow us to do that. There is, if we want to, if you're using micro services, what we could do is we could also use distributed Hazelcast caching, which you can host as a separate server or maybe include it in your applications. And also there's a lot of other caching technologies like Memcache and in Finispan and all that kind of stuff. But we're gonna use, just because we have only one node, which is going to have one single node. What I mean by that is just monolithic application. We will use the caching for this one. Second level caching also is another thing, which is mainly with Hibernate. So it's another level of caching where Hibernate is very clever, that it does some calculation and then realize that, oh, I don't need to go to the database as well. So this also, we say yes, we want it. We have two options for build tools. One is to use Maven, another one is Gradle. I've tried Gradle and don't like it with Android as well, so I really still like to stay with the Maven. I don't know why, but it's every time I try, I have too many problems with Gradle, even though it's been there for a long time. The only place it works for me is when I'm developing an Android application directly with Android Studio. So I'm gonna go to Maven, and I'm gonna include also an Elasticsearch to my server. What this means now, the reason why we need on this Elasticsearch I've described previously, I think, is to search queries. So what would happen is we would have MySQL database, but also what we would have is an Elasticsearch data. Let's call it another database. So, but you need to keep them in sync, and only the Elasticsearch database is just like if someone wants products, and you want to have in your application, you have something like a search box, and then you want to see all the products in there. MySQL is not very good with like returning results from, for example, from different columns, unless you combine, like you say, select where column name equals first name equals this, and the last name equals this, and the last name, and then you combine them, you join them, and that kind of stuff. With Elasticsearch, the way it works is it was designed for this kind of stuff. So your query goes to the database of the Elasticsearch, and then it returns for you the keywords from different even columns, from different first names. You can just give it to like my name, Ahmed, and it will give you, if the last name includes Ahmed, it will give you, if the first name includes Ahmed, it will give you, and all that kind of stuff. And you don't even have to specify like column names and all that kind of stuff. And it's fast as well to search, because MySQL database is not good with text search, basically, all that kind of stuff. So we will select Elasticsearch because I want it from to develop from front end application to be able to search this kind of stuff. What would also this will do is it will generate as a Docker configured Elasticsearch application. So what it's also asking us is, which framework would you like to use for your client, Angular or React? So both of them are JavaScript front-end development. We've realized that, remember this, the guy who developed this Jhipster application, it was previously a Java guy, and the fact that he just started from Java and then moved on to I think his name is Julian Debu, the guy who came up with Jhipster, even though now it's maintained by a big team, basically community, even though he has a big influence in that still. But what I'm saying is, like, the weird thing I'm finding here is we're generating a Spring Boot Java application, but we're selecting a front-end JavaScript. In my days when we used to have JSP, in the old days when we have basically JSPs, JSF, and even though you can have JSF and that kind of stuff, but like people moved up like Strats and all that kind of stuff, frameworks for Java-based development. People moved away from all that's Java based to JavaScript now. And in the old days, we used to have it used to be so difficult to debug JavaScript, and I used to hate when I see JSPs with JavaScript coded in that, but inserted. But now the fact that we have React, JavaScript has moved on with like ES6 and ES7, ES5, and it's almost like developing, especially with the support of TypeScript and all that kind of stuff. It's just like developing an object-oriented, strongly typed applications that is very easy to debug and also easy to understand, and gives you a lot of frameworks. And with the power of Node, npm, and all that kind of stuff, adding package, it became fantastic. So combining the two technologies from Java as well as the JavaScript and putting together, now you need to be a full stack developer because if you now have to go as a Java developer, you need to go to and learn JavaScript basically, and also React and Angular, whatever, all these things to use that. But I suggest that you stay with one of them, like React. If you stay React, because Angular is completely different from React, and even though both of them are JavaScript, they are brought two different frameworks for UI and all that kind of stuff. So let's move on and just select React. SAS is another superset of basically CSS processes that the from Java developers, if you're talking about, normally what we deal with is just CSS directly. We know what CSS is, we know it's a static resource and all that kind of stuff. With SAS object, they're no longer is static. Basically, it's just to see a programming code inside CSS files, basically, where some processor or something they call the preprocessors, when you're compiling your application, it takes those SAS files, which are just CSS files with just variables and all that kind of stuff and functions in them, and then it compiles and basically processes and converts into actual CSS, basically. So like now, the same way that you can have basically we used to have templates like free marker templates where you have variables inside them, and then you have the whatever, the HTML code and all that kind of stuff. The same way that that logic applies to here as well. So it's just like pre-processing your CSS files with this preprocessors. One of them is called a SAS. There's many of them out there that if you find it. So we want that thing as well in our code. Internationalization. Look at, it's telling us what language do we want, and if you're a Java developer, especially web app developer, you know how much headache you go through just to generate translations and also to configure the context and all that kind of stuff. This will do for us, so we don't even need to worry about that. So we select how many languages. There's so many languages supported there, so we'll select English, and the second language I need to select is Arabic, because the application, the point of sale, is sale application that I want to develop, the customers will mainly be Arabs. Basically, we speak Arabic. So that is the other thing. The one other thing what we have here is tests. Tests are it's like a complete different world by themselves. So from here, what we could do is, like, you remember, like, we have different tests, like when you're testing an application, like performance test, we have integration test, we have unit tests, we have user interface test, all that kind of stuff. So what we could do is, I'm gonna discuss much about it. So if you want to talk about these three things that normally Jhipster is supposed to test with you, and some of these three things are basically, some of them are for the back end, and some of them are for the front end. Some of them are Java for Java, and some of them are for the JavaScript. But we will select all of them so that we know how to test our application with this. So if let's move on. So what Jhipster has also is something called a marketplace. I'm gonna go quickly into to the marketplace in here. Let's go Jhipster marketplace, and we'll quickly go in here and we'll say, okay, these are all the stuff that we can find in the marketplace. what you find here is, remember, what I said, Jhipster is a generator. But what they have developed is something called a module, which is allows you, when you use that, and then it will give you to generate sub-generators. So if you want to extend the power of Jhipster, to you can use it via this thing called sub-generators, and one of them is like Prime. I don't know if you guys remember from the old days with JSF. I remember Prime. I can't remember Prime Faces or something like that. I remember using it a while back. But in here, what you can have is a lot of generators. For example, this is one of the good things about this. This generator is based on um, it will generate React Native application, and obviously from React Native application you have two native Android and iOS applications in there that can connect it to your backend. So a lot of the stuff, when you use this generator, it will give you an application, a React Native application with the security in it, with the entities on it. It also supports the JDL entity, so you can just import that and that kind of stuff. These are some of these stuff are developed by independent. You can just go into Jhipster, see how they configure their module, and then basically use those module how basically generate a sub generator of your own. If you have any of the charts and all that kind of stuff, there's hundreds of, almost a lot of sub generators that can extend your application with different stuff. So it's saying in the command line here, do you want to get any of those sub generators included in your a default Jhipster application? So there is a lot of also sub generators within the default sub generator, like the import JDL, the all that kind of stuff, and also the continuous integration stuff, and the somewhat are in there, but do not confused with that. So you can also install these sub generators later separately if you want, if you don't want to install it now. So I'm going to move on now. I'm going to say I don't want that, and it's going to start basically generating. Look how much code it generates. My God. And this is just like we've not even